So I would like you to take a moment and imagine the next scenario. So you just finished working on a really big project, and you're meeting your boss to get your next assignment, and your boss asks you to maintain a legacy project. How do you feel about it? Are you excited? Are you full of joy? So I'm going to take a wild guess, full of joy. So I'm going to take a wild guess that your answer is probably not. We all know that maintaining legacy projects is hard, it's frustrating, and generally we try to do everything we can to avoid it. So my name is Dalia. I'm a server architect at Wix. Why isn't this work? Okay, I'm a server architect at Wix, and I currently own a legacy project. So its official name is the HTML mobile editor project, but we all like to refer to it as the old mobile. So everybody will know this is old code, it's no fun, we don't like the way it's written. And so the way I got this project, when I got it, it was new and shiny. So I just joined the company 5 years ago. They just finished writing this project, and I was handed it over, and it was very exciting. But then during the last 5 years, suddenly it became a legacy project, and I started feeling the pain of having to maintain it all the time. And I also got involved with maintaining other legacy projects that we have in the company, and we currently have quite a few of them. And so it made me think, why do we have so many of them? Why do they exist at all? And also, can we make maybe a bullet list or some guidelines to how we want to maintain it, so this task will be easier? So today I want to share with you some of my thoughts about it, why we have those projects, why I actually think they're important, and why they don't die, so they are immortal. And also give you some tips and suggestions from our experience at Wix on how this task, if you ever get it, God forbid, can be a big success for you. So, no. Okay, so why do we have legacy projects? Where do they come from? So no one in his right mind sits around and says, what am I going to write now? I know I'm going to create a legacy project. So this is not how things work. So it really all starts with an idea. So someone has an idea for a new project, for a new product. Maybe it's a product manager. Maybe someone starts a new startup with a new idea. And then it's a good idea. It's a good idea. And designs are drawn. Hundreds, thousands of lines of codes are written. And eventually, the project makes it to production. Yay. And so it's a successful project, and it starts gaining customers. And over time, new features are added to it, the project is extended, and it becomes profitable. So this is a very important point for me, because projects that aren't successful and are not profitable will just die. They will not become legacy projects. So the reason we have legacy projects is because those projects are making us money, and we don't want to kill them. And so after a while, something happens, don't know what, and we magically find ourselves here where we have a legacy project. And the question I was asking myself is, what happened here? How did we go from having a nice, successful project to having this legacy project that nobody wants to touch? And so I looked at all of our legacy projects at Wix, and I actually categorized it into 3 different reasons why we got to have a legacy project. So the first one, it really has nothing to do with us. We have a great project. Our project is written very nicely, but somehow technology has changed in the world, and so the technology that we were supporting isn't relevant anymore. And we have a really great example for that. So when Wix was founded in 2006, Flash was the next big thing in the internet world. You could make great websites, and you could have great animations. And so our founders, they had this great idea. They were going to create a startup that what it did was an editor where you can make your own Flash site. So we had this editor, and it was great. It was working. It was actually quite a mature product, and we had a lot of customers and a lot of subscriptions to it. But then something horrible happened. iPhone came out. So once the iPhone came out and Steve Jobs said, you know what, we're not having flash in our iPhones, then suddenly this great product we had, which was really, state of the art, wasn't relevant anymore. And so we had to do something very, very quickly so that our startup won't close completely, because we had a product for a technology that no one was supporting anymore. And so we wrote a new editor for creating HTML5 sites. So we did this very, very fast because we didn't want to get out of market. But we still had a lot of customers on our old Flash editor, and they were paying customers. They were paying annual subscriptions so they can have their Flash sites, and they didn't want to move to the HTML5 site. They also wanted all of those great features that Flash had, but we didn't have all of them to start with on our new editor. And so our Flash editor became a legacy project, which we still maintain up to this day, still has quite a lot of paying customers, still makes the company quite a lot of money, and money is good. And yeah, it's going to be a point of this talk, that money is good. And so we have the Flash editor, which is actually not a bad piece of code, but it is now legacy. So no new features are added to it. It's like frozen. And we're just doing regular maintenance on it, but we don't really add any new features to it. So that's the first example. And the second one is what you're probably always thinking about when someone says legacy projects. So it's these old, bad-written projects. They're not fully tested, either because they were written really, really fast, or because when you wrote them, you didn't really have the concept of writing tests, or maybe you had only unit tests, but today you do integration tests and end-to-end tests, and then maybe it just doesn't look to you today like it's tested enough. At the time it was fine. And then the second thing is that they were never properly refactored, so more and more code accumulated, but no one ever refactored them, and the code became very complicated, which ended up in spaghetti code. And it becomes very, very difficult to add new features and components. So I'm actually going to continue my example from before and talk about how we moved our HTML editor to React. So as I told you, we built our HTML editor very, very fast because we had to be there in the market. We had to get a product out. And so it was written so fast that the code was one big mess. So it was JavaScript code. And after a while, I think a year after the release, we came to a point where whenever a product manager would come and want to add a feature, the answer would always be 6 months, which is crazy for small features. And they just realized that this cannot work anymore, and we have to rewrite it. So this is a classic example. We've rewritten the whole editor, so we stopped working, no new features on this is our major product, and we've rewritten it using React. But we didn't rewrite a project using React only because React is cool and it's the new technology. So we wrote it because we had a real reason that we had to rewrite the project. And then the old HTML editor became a legacy project. Now, I've had some people ask me before, when I gave this talk, why do we still have this old HTML editor if we moved to the new one? Why didn't we move all the customers? And the reason is that it wasn't that easy to migrate all of the existing customers. So we're still in the process. It's been out for 2 years. We're still in the process of migrating. And it's not always that simple. And I'll talk about it a bit later. And so we've rewritten it in our great new HTML editor. And so the third reason, I think, is the most positive one of them all, is you're writing a system, and it's fine, it works, and then suddenly it grows so much. You have so many new customers that it just doesn't hold the load and the scalability it needs to hold. And then you don't have a choice but making an architectural change and rewriting the system so that you can actually hold the amount of customers that you currently have. And so this is a story of how we left Magento. So one of the things Wix does is we give our customers add-ons they can put on their Wix websites they create for themselves. And one of the biggest one is an e-commerce solution. so they can create their own shop and sell their products. And when we first did it, we wanted to get something out very fast. So we found this startup. It's an Israeli startup. It's called Magento. Their code is written in PHP, and they have an e-commerce solution. And so we cooperated with them. They were very excited to have a big customer like Wix. And we actually wrote our e-commerce engine on top of their e-commerce engine. But their solution was really built for a website that wanted to buy their solution and run one store. But we were running hundreds of stores, and then 1,000 stores, and then tens of thousands. And when we got to 100,000, it stopped working. Because the engine just wasn't built for such a big scale of stores. And so we decided to rewrite it, and we rewrote it in-house, actually using our own stack. So PHP, we actually have no projects in PHP in Wix. We only use it because of Magento. And so we took the opportunity to write it using Scala, which is what we write at Wix. And we also moved it to be event-sourced. So we do like to use new technologies when we rewrite. And because we moved it to be event-sourced, and because we moved from the Magento database that was very complex and built for them, the migration became very hard to start with. I think they estimated it as in 3 months. And 2 years later, I think we're just about ready to finish the migration process. So that's why we still have the old e-commerce is another one of our legacy projects. So all of those examples are why we find ourselves proud owners of legacy projects. And those projects are still alive because we still have customers to support. And especially because we still have paying customers to support. And I'll elaborate a bit more. So we always strive to migrate everything. So at Wix, we actually rewrite a lot of projects, and usually we think about the migration when we start writing start rewriting the project. But it's just not always that simple. And a lot of time, it's also a matter of cost. So how much will it cost you to migrate from the old project to the new project, and is it worthwhile the effort? So the Flash sites, migrating them to HTML sites, because it's completely different technology, and it's very, very hard to actually migrate a site, so it will look the same in the HTML from Flash. Then the effort was huge, and I think the only reason we actually started doing it, and we're actually now in the process of doing that, is because we felt like really Flash technology is going to die, and we have to do something with those customers. But otherwise, I don't think anybody would invest that amount of money in migrating users that are using a system, they are happy with it, they are paying every month, they don't care. We actually blocked the option of creating Flash websites, and we still have a few tens of them created each day. People like it, don't know why. Yeah, so you got a legacy project, it's a fact, we know why. Now what are we going to do about it? So the first thing any one of us would really like to do with this legacy project we inherited is rewrite, because we are engineers and that's what we like to do. So what we really like to do is go delete this old project. We're going to rewrite it with our favorite language, with all the new and shiny tools we can find. We're going to write it properly. We're going to write it TDD this time, so no problem with tests. Well, rewrites are pretty expensive. And a lot of times we found ourselves with the legacy project because it was also already rewritten. And nobody is going to invest money and resources to rewrite a project that is already legacy code. And so rewrite is probably not the answer. So the second option we have is to refactor some of the nastier parts of our code. And the problem with that is that refactoring code that you didn't write, so you don't know 100% what's going on there, and is usually not completely covered with tests, is very, very risky. And so that's not a great idea. Making small maintenance steps on it is what I'm going to talk about today. But before I do that, I want to discuss why I think that doing nothing is a very, very bad solution. So, as engineers, we know the phrase, if it's not broken, don't fix it. It's running in production, we'll just leave it there, it's gonna be fine, nothing will happen. The problem with that is that our projects are not isolated. So unless you have a little hello world running in Bash, you probably have a lot of dependencies, you're probably interacting with a lot of other systems, and once you're doing nothing, your project is actually decaying. So you could find that a project you interact with changed its API, and you might wake up one morning and find that Google deprecated the API you were using, and then you won't have a choice but to go and update your project. You might find that a third-party library that you use, and we all use today loads of libraries, have an urgent security fix, and suddenly you have to go and deploy with those security fixes. You might find a bug in your code, which sounds a bit crazy for projects that have been running for so long, but I can tell you that my HTML mobile project had an urgent bug 3 months ago. Suddenly, security team found an urgent bug, which was there for 5 years, but suddenly they found it and I had to go and fix it. And you might find that external technologies you use have to be upgraded, and you have to upgrade yours as well because you're sharing the resources of the company. So we used Mongo, for example, and the whole company was upgrading the Mongo version, so I had to go and upgrade my driver, and it made a few code changes, and I had to go and do it. Now, if you don't maintain your project regularly, any one of those tasks can end up with weeks or months of work just to get the project running again because so many changes have been made. So, I think that maintenance is the key, and it is the balance between gaining a lot of technical debt or having your project decaying. So where do we start? I think the first step before anything else is owning. So having an owner for a project. Now it doesn't mean that only one person knows this code or only one person has to touch this code. It's not what it means. It means there is one person who's in charge of this project, and he has to make sure that the project is up to date. He can hand the job over to other people, and he can ask for other people to help, but one person is in charge. So when a person is in charge, he knows it's his responsibility. If you say a team is in charge, then maybe no one actually takes responsibility for this project. And another thing I would like to say is that I know in a lot of companies, they tend to give these projects to the more junior engineers because nobody really wants to touch them. So someone new comes in, and we say, okay, we'll give them this project. And I think that's a bad habit. First of all, because it's discouraging for junior engineers. But I also think the more senior engineers have better understanding, especially engineers that have been in the company for a long time, have better understanding of why we got here, what this project was meant to do, about the logic of the project. And so I think it's a better idea to give this project as like another task. It's not your main task. You always work on different projects, but give it as another task for your more senior engineers, which is what we do at Wix. And another important thing to remember is that learning a new project takes time. So if you inherited a really big project, the chance of you actually going over it and understanding everything that this project does is very slim. And I don't think it's a good idea to invest all this time in it. So a lot of people, they like to really know the project they work on. But for such big projects, it's not always easy. And I think a lot of time it's just a waste of your time. So it's a better practice to just learn one bit at a time. Every time you have to touch something, then you learn that piece. So you should have a general idea about what this project is doing, but you don't need to go and learn all of the APIs on day one. You learn them. You'll get to them. Don't worry. And so we get to my 4 rules of staying alive. So the first one is always keep everything under CI. So we work with continuous integration. So every time we push our code, the build runs automatically, and all the tests have to be green. and then we can go and deploy it to production. So always make sure your build is green. So a lot of times my build breaks, not because of a change I made, but because of a change someone else made. So I depend on other projects, internal projects, and they make a change, and then they break my project. And so I go and look at why they broke my project. And I see that sometimes I see it's very simple. They just moved one class somewhere else. So I delete my import and I re-import and everything is fine. I run my build, it's green, 5 minutes. Everything is okay. I continue with whatever it is I did. Sometimes they make a big change and they don't realize that they actually broke your project. So this is where the ownership things comes in. So I get an automatic email that my project is red now, so it's broken. And then I go to the person who broke the project and I say, hey dude, you broke my project. And it's his responsibility. It's not my responsibility because it's my project to now go and fix it and spend a few days to fix whatever this guy broke. It's his responsibility to fix the project that he broke or roll back his code or discuss a solution with me if he needs my help. So I'm always there to help, but it's everybody's responsibility for this project. I'm just the owner, so I have to go there and make sure that they actually do it and actually fix my project. And the second thing, which is very important, is to deploy to production regularly. And so at Wix, we have this automatic email for all projects, not just legacy projects. If you haven't deployed them for 30 days, you'll get an automatic email saying, you haven't deployed for 30 days, please deploy. And then we just go and deploy. And what happens every once in a while is that I go and I deploy this project. I haven't touched it for the last months. I just go and deploy it, and it fails. Maybe because someone changed the dependency, some version changed, and it's not working anymore. But at least I know that I only have 1 month back to look at to find what broke my project. Whereas if I wouldn't deploy it every month, I might find myself looking at a year back of logs of Git commits and trying to figure out who broke my project, and that's just crazy. So my second tip is keep up to date with dependencies. So our project use a lot of dependencies, and we try to upgrade them all the time. And I did put a disclosure as long as they don't break compatibility. And that's, I think, up to you to decide if they break compatibility, if you want to upgrade anyway and fix, or you want to leave it as it is. So I think most minor versions don't break compatibility, but major versions might. And then I always look at it how hard the fix is going to be. So if it's like 2-3 hours, I just go and do it. And if I look at it and I say, okay, this is going to take me a few days, then usually I leave it alone unless it's an important security update, and then I don't have a choice, I go and do it. And the second one is don't be tempted to freeze dependencies. So a lot of times we're tempted to do that, especially on those very, very old projects. But I think it's a bad idea because of all the reasons I spoke to you before of why doing nothing is a bad idea. And I think we always strive to actually update our dependencies and keep up to date with all the other projects in the company. And the other thing I would also say is that we did try on those projects to kind of not upgrade them when we did other upgrades in the company. So we started running all our web servers on Tomcat, then we moved to Jetty, and we left them in Tomcat because we said, we don't want to invest those days to move them to Jetty, don't know what's going to happen. And at the end of the day, we spent so much time having to maintain this old technology that those projects were still working with, that it was more worthwhile just going and doing the move, so moving with everybody else. So now I just try and make sure the project moves. Whenever all the other projects move to something, I try and move those projects as well. And the rule of thumb I have with my boss is, if it takes me more than 5 days, then we're giving up and we're not doing this. So I'm not going to spend more than 5 days on an old project. But if it's less, and usually it's a day or two, then we're going to go and do it. So the third thing I learned, I want to say a few words about our framework. So I know a lot of companies probably have that as well. We have a framework where we have a lot of services that are shared between all projects, like network concerns and security and other concerns. And what we found out was that over time, we made a lot of changes to the frameworks, but all those old legacy projects continued using the old code, and it had to stay there in the framework just for those old legacy projects. And then one day we woke up and we found new projects that were using this old code that we didn't want anybody to touch, and we actually marked as deprecated, but people were using anyway because they found it in the framework. And so we actually isolated it. We took all of that old code out, put it in a new project, called it Legacy Projects Do Not Use. So we actually quarantined our old code, and we actually learned the lesson. So the lesson we learned is, A, don't pollute other projects. So we were polluting the framework project with all this old code because they couldn't delete it because of us. And the day they deleted all this code, there was a little party in the office. And the second thing is that code that exists will be used. Even if you mark it with deprecated, even if you put big comments of why people shouldn't use it, they will use it if they find it. So if you don't want people to use it, hide it. And then the fourth tip is that small steps are the key. So whenever you touch the code, you see deprecations of old classes that changed and you're still using the old version, imports, etc. Just remove them. I actually have in my calendar 15 minutes per week where I go to my project and I look at it. And I run the build and I get the list of all the warnings and I start going over them and I say, and then I say, oh, my time is up. Okay, next week. I push whatever I did next week. And so it keeps the project kind of cleaner than if you just leave it alone. And I improve the test. So every time I touch something, I have to fix a bug, something broke. I try and add a test to check whatever it is that broke. And so I think over time, I have more and more tests in my code base. It will never be fully covered. It will never be properly tested. But at least I have more tests. And the next time, I might actually find a bug because of the tests I have. And I make small refactors. So if I got a piece of code and I read it and I didn't understand what on earth was going on, then I'm not going to leave it like that after I understood what's going on. I'm going to refactor it. I'm going to maybe just extract to a method and give it a name so the next person will actually understand what this meant to do. Maybe give it more readable names. A lot of times just making small changes like that can really help the next person who looks at it, or me, in 6 months, because I'm not going to remember what I did now. And removing dead code. So a lot of those projects actually have a lot of parts of them that no one uses anymore. And when you look at them, A, you get scared, because there are so many APIs, but half of them aren't used, and you don't know what's used and what's not used. And so I did use some monitoring tools. So we use New Relic, but you can use any monitoring tool to check what APIs are actually used. And whatever wasn't used, I just removed. And then I deployed slowly, and I made sure I didn't accidentally delete. I once actually accidentally deleted something someone needed. It took them 1 month until they complained, so they didn't need it very urgently, and I added it back. But I think it's a good practice. So always remember the Boy Scout rule. Always keep the campground cleaner than you found it. And I think you'll... big question. Sorry, I forgot about this slide. How long are those projects going to stay? So I did say they were immortal, but that's not completely true. So the problem with those projects are that a lot of times they're the most profitable project the company actually has. Why? Because they make a lot of money and you almost don't invest any time in them. So I invest 15 to 30 minutes maybe per week, usually less than that. But the project makes a lot of money. So it's very profitable. So when will it die? Either the technology will come to end of life. So in our case, when Flash comes to end of life, the Flash project will end because can't run Flash sites on anything. When you finish migrating, so we've discussed that before. Or when it's just not profitable anymore. So over time, you might see that the number of customers just goes down, and at a certain point, the cost of my 30 minutes might actually be lower than what this project is actually making. And so it won't be profitable anymore, and the company will just decide to close it, and the customers will have to find a different solution. And so I think you'll see that if you take small maintenance steps over time, you'll keep your project healthy and running, and it will be much easier and much more successful maintaining those projects. So that's it. So any questions I can answer? Yes, Nati. So I think sometimes our projects just become legacy, so they're already ours and we own them. And the second thing, which I'm not sure if you're here or not, but we actually ask our senior developers to own the legacy projects instead of throwing them for the junior developers, as done in most companies. And I think senior developers, you expect them to understand the importance of those projects, and people take them seriously, and actually it's part of your job and you take it seriously. It's not the project you work on, you do it as an extra, but yeah, that's what we do. Yes? Yeah, so we find. Yes, I'm sorry. So he asked, what do we do when our senior developer actually moves on to a different company, and now we have to find a new owner for this project? So it only happened to us once, but what we usually do is we find someone else who doesn't have a senior developer who doesn't have a legacy project yet, so we can give him, because we don't think it's fair to have more than one of those per person. And so we just hand over the project. As I said before, the new person doesn't have to spend his time now actually learning this new project. It's his. He needs to deploy it once a month. That's easy. He goes and he does it. And when he'll have a problem, then he'll go and learn the code. Whatever broke, he'll go and learn it. And I think the other thing is that we have a few people in the company who actually knows those projects, so people that were still here when they were written, and they really give a hand and help. So it's a shared responsibility. One person is an owner, but it's really a shared responsibility between all the senior developers. That's it. Well, thank you very much.